And Mark, welcome to the Deep Life.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I think also, just want our listeners to know, I think, Mark, you might be our first guest that's in England, that's in the UK.
I'm honored.
Yeah, there you go. That's
I'm
a big
very,
win.
very honored to be the first. That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
So I've got the whole of the UK on my shoulders right now. I've been like, you've got to represent us perfectly well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's good. That accent sounds so smart. So people are going to eat it up.
I can make it sound posher if you want, or I can make it sound a little bit more like Cockney London, it's depending on what you want.
Yeah. I want to jump right in because I'm really excited to have this conversation and to dive deep with you. So let's start. You are a functional health coach.
I am indeed.
Can you share what exactly a functional health coach is for any listeners who might not know? And then maybe we can get into how you became one.
100%. Yeah. Okay. So obviously everybody at this point is probably going to know what a health coach is. So that's going to be a coach that is going to be helping anybody with their health in general. Functional health coaching is more in line with functional medicine and the way that functional medicine treats people. So I've been trained through kind of functional medicine through the Institute of Health, which is where I learned what I do. It teaches how to do functional blood work. It teaches us how to create a health screening form, which answers more deep-rooted questions. So we can start to look at things outside of just that normal conventional range. So we'll start looking at kind of emotional kind of symptomology, physiology, traumas, all those types of things. So they all connect. So it's looking at the whole body as a system and treating it as such. So not treating just one specific symptom, but looking at the whole body as a system and treating it that way. So functional health coaches will use things like blood work, GI map testing for the stomach. You could use hair and mineral analysis. You could use an oats test, which is, again, testing for organic acids and things. We can use these types of tests to help us help our client, basically. And that's where the functional side of the health coach comes in. So it's a little bit more deep rooted, which actually works perfectly with this podcast, doesn't it?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I like that because I think that a problem that so many people run into with like Western medicine in general is the idea of treating each individual symptom with its different specific medication or treatment.
Exactly.
And then you just end up with a list of more symptoms that need to be treated with more and more different medications and never really getting to the root cause or kind of getting trapped with something.
Yeah, and that word there, kind of like the root cause, that is exactly what this is all about. So when you're looking at anything from a functional perspective, whether you're going to a functional health coach or a functional medicine doctor, and obviously the difference there, just so people can understand, is to be a functional medicine doctor, you've either got to go through, I think it's like the 8 years worth of training to do that, or you've got to be a doctor first, and then you can go into the functional medicine side of things and actually call yourself an FMD, a functional medicine doctor. I don't have that background, so I can't do that. And I don't really want to spend 8 or however many years going through that. But the root cause approach is the same through that whole system. And it's understanding that all things are going to be coming from a root cause, because the body doesn't get sick in isolation. It doesn't heal in isolation. It doesn't get injured in isolation. And then again, it doesn't heal in isolation. So it's finding that root cause or root causes, which are contributing to the myriad of potential symptoms that somebody is facing.
I love that. I say all the time, everything is everything. And it's impossible to isolate one part of our lives, let alone like health and biology.
Oh, mate, 100%. I mean, even if you look at nature, there is no absolute in nature. There's nothing that works solely on its own. If you look at like the greatest thing that we have on our planet, in our system, which makes everything function, the sun has a complete opposite with the moon. So nothing works on its own. Everything needs to have either a partner with it or a team with it. So the planets and so on, like everything needs everything. You can't just have that one isolated thing. I mean, outside of, oh, that's a broken arm, so you need to fix it, which is isolated. But then you got to think about, okay, so if the arm is broken, the function of the arm changes. And then once it's healed, that functionality needs to be retrained so that you don't get compensations, same as what you get with all injuries. So again, doesn't work in isolation. It would need to be healed in a system.
Yeah. And even with a broken arm, like we really don't know how it's healing. We just know that you can put it back together and put a cast so it stays back together. And then eventually the body will just fix it. We don't even really know how that's happening.
No, definitely not. And I think there's only like one part of the body which is regenerative in itself, which is the liver. So the liver is the only organ which will
Mhm.
regenerate. And even we don't understand why it does that either. And
Yeah.
they've been testing on animals for years. And that sounds horrible to say that, but there's a book called The Body Electric,
Hmm.
where they
Mhm.
talk about how, have you read that book?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you know about the salamanders and how they can regrow their limbs, and they've
Yep.
tested why this is, and it's like AC current, DC current, and all these other types of things. Like there's so many multitudes within the body. You know, one minute it's about frequency and vibration, another minute it's about something else, another minute it's about water, then it's about electricity. There's
Hmm.
so many parts to us. We're such a complex system. It's almost idiotic to think that you can narrow it down to one thing
Yeah.
because that doesn't compute for me. It can't be that simple. It just can't be.
Yeah. And I feel like it never, like when you try, it never really works out. And I think we've been banging our heads against the wall for so long because we got away from
Exactly.
the ways of nature and so
Yeah.
the ways of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you get into functional health coaching? And like, what's your background there?
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's a very deep question. All right. So
Hmm.
I'll give you, I'll split it up. I'll explain how I got into the functional side of things and then
Okay.
how I got into the health side of things. So the functional side of things came actually from lockdown. So before lockdown, I had a very successful personal training business. And when lockdown happened, I couldn't obviously service my clients because we couldn't see anybody in person. So a lot of those particular types of clients want to be trained in person. They don't want to be online. So they need that motivation and that accountability. Where some of the clients were fine to move on to online. So I'd say I lost 90% of my client base. And the ones that stayed, I was coaching and thinking, okay, this is good, but there's not enough here because I'm not talking to them. I'm not seeing them. And when I'm
Hmm.
talking to clients, when I was training them, I'm talking to them about mindset. I'm talking to them about nutrition. I'm talking to them about mindfulness and different supplements and things like this. You're actually giving them like a life coaching session while you're
Yeah.
coaching them through training, right? So you end up being kind of like this myriad of things to this one person in just one hour.
Therapist.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, so how can I do this but make it online? And I was like, right, okay, I probably need to learn a little bit more. And during that process, I'd already got into the biohacking side of things because I used to do CrossFit before that and I used to coach that as well. So
Mhm.
I knew from the aching knees, the shoulders, the back, I needed to biohack to be able to basically recover quicker and get through that kind of process to be able to progress through CrossFit. So I was using red lights and I was using peptides and things like this. And I thought, okay, well, I need to go deeper into this because as we said on our first kind of introductory call together, you know, that anybody can make anybody lose weight, but unless you make them lose weight from their mind, they will never keep it off. There's a
Mhm.
great Ziegler quote there. So I realized that quite early on in my career. And I thought, okay, so there's parts missing here. And that's the more holistic alternative approach. So I went into the functional medicine side. I found at the time it was called the Carter Institute, and it's run by a gentleman called Jake Carter and his lovely partner, Kat. And it's now called the Institute of Health. I joined that, would it have been beginning of 2021, I believe it might have been. And I mean, maybe end of 2020. I forget. It seems a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But
That's such a weird time anyways.
I know it seems like a really, 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 really long time ago, but
Yeah.
it actually wasn't. And
Mhm.
so I joined that, and that's when I got fully into the function side of things, realizing that there's so much more to the health side than just calories in, calories out, and move more. Like I realized it wasn't just about the weight loss because that's just about aesthetics
Mhm.
and not really focusing too much. At that time, it was called longevity. Well, now it's probably called like health span, I guess, like or healthgevity. It's
Yeah.
like living a long life, but what's the point of getting to 100 years old if you're decrepit and you can't move and you're in pain? You probably want to be as healthy at 90 or 100 as you are at 60 or 70 retrospective. So
Mhm.
that's really what drove me down. I was like, okay, like this anti-aging longevity side of things, I really want to get into that because I had a test done during COVID, and it tested my biological age. And at the time, it's a company called Glycanage, great company, and I ended up being a consultant for them for a little while. And at the time, as I said, I've been doing CrossFit and functional bodybuilding with Marcus Filly at that point for about 5 years, 6 years. And, you know, I was like 6% body fat and I thought I was amazing. I could run marathons without really trying and all the rest of that type of stuff. And I
Mhm.
was like, you know, I feel amazing. I'm really, really healthy. I'm probably like, I don't know, 20 years old biologically. Had my test done and I was actually 20 years older. So I was like, hold on. I was like, so I
Oh
eat
my
this.
gosh.
I know. So I was like, I eat like this, I train like this, but the what the test is testing, this glycanase test is testing glycans. So like the IgGs, which is your immune system, basically. So I was like, but my immune system's 20 years older than I am. I was like, that's not a good sign. And they were so concerned, the company, the owner, Nicolina, called me and was like, we need to get you on a call. We've not seen this before. And I was like, that's not good. So that's then really what pushed me even further into this, thinking, okay, so I'm eating right, I'm
Yeah.
eating right, I'm training right, I'm sleeping right, which I wasn't. Why am I so bad? Why do I not feel on the inside or appear on the inside as much as I do on the outside? And it's because of this chronic inflammation from overdoing all the time, right? So that's really what drove me down the functional side even deeper and getting into much, much more of the nuance of all this type of stuff. And I'll park that one for a moment because that can go on for quite a while. What really got me into fitness, though, was as everybody is with the hero's journey, if you speak to any kind of health coach, it's because they've had issues themselves. So when I was young, when I was born like 9 weeks old, I got diagnosed with meningococcal septicemia, which is meningitis B. It's the meningitis that infects the lining of the brain. And if my mum hadn't gone and got a second opinion, the first opinion was just ear infection, and I'd have died. So they then panicked and they basically pumped me full of tons of antibiotics for a very long time, which we now know causes chronic issues with the microbiome and the immune system and stuff like that. But unfortunately, due to the meningitis, it made me my immune system very weak. So I then, up until the age of like 6 or 7, pretty much caught every illness there was. So I went blind, I went deaf, I had ear infections, chest infections, pneumonia, measles, rubella, whooping cough, whatever you can think of. My mum had like a thick book like this of all the things that I went through. My poor mum, bless her.
Yeah.
So that didn't really set me up very well. So as obviously I was getting older, I knew my health wasn't particularly good. So at the age of 13, I convinced the bodybuilder of the local gym to allow me to start training because I wanted to be healthier. I actually wanted to be bigger because I was like this 8 stone little weakling. I was like, right, I need to get bigger and stronger and stuff. So that kind of got me into the world. And then of fitness, that is. And then as I progressed through that over the years, just bad form, bad coaching, trying to copy the big dudes at the gym. I just amassed many injuries. And by the time that I was 24, they wanted to put a metal rod in my spine because they said that I was going to be bent over like a 9-year-old man, just looking at the ground by the time that I was 30. And they diagnosed me with something called Schauman's disease, which is where the middle to the lower part of your back, the vertebrae basically starts to close. It's not thick, it's really, really close. And the synovial fluid isn't as good, and it just doesn't look as pretty, and the vertebrae are all knuckled and they're not flat and smooth, and they're like, right, you're just going to be so degenerated by the time you're 30, you need to have a metal rod in your spine. And I was like, this is not happening. So I was like, I'm just going to rectify this myself and fix this myself. I don't believe this, which is what I did, and obviously it worked because, as I say, the gymnastics from CrossFit, Olympic lifting through CrossFit, all that stuff, I was able and still am able to do those things, and I am not bent double right now. So that was my first foray into where Western medicine might not have got it right. And then more things like that happened as I got older. So I tore my rotator cuff and had to have my shoulder rebuilt. So I had something done called a subacromial decompression. I had when I was 15, my PE teacher did a static rugby tackle on me at school and actually followed through. So he put my kneecap around the back of my leg, partially tore my ACL, MCL, my meniscus, my patella tendon, the whole lot, to the point where I had to learn how to walk again. So that had to be repaired. And I've had 4 surgeries on that knee to get it fully where it needs to be. And it's absolutely fine now, which is fantastic. I tore the labrum in this shoulder. I tore the epicondyle ligament in my elbow. So that was 2 surgeries for that one. As I say, the surgery on here. I've obviously then broken toes, broken my foot, I've broken many things. And a lot of dysfunction has happened because of that. And then in 2011, I got very, very sick due to the stress that I had at work. They diagnosed me with IBS. And, anytime I ate anything, I looked like I was 9 months pregnant. And I lost about 3.5 stone in about 2 months. Again, they couldn't fix it for me. So I delved into the research and fixed it myself. And just thought, okay, this is like now number what, 4 or 5 incidents of seeing that this system doesn't really kind of work very well. And just thought, okay, I need to learn about all this stuff. I need to fix myself. So hopefully at some point this might be able to help other people. And this has happened along this hero's journey the whole way through. Eventually getting to the point where I think it might have been my mum or my dad just said to me, like, why aren't you doing this for a living? Like, you love speaking to people, you're
Mm.
great in front of people, you love fitness, you don't stop talking about it. Why don't you coach people? And I was like, that's a good idea. So I went and did my PT certification, and in 2011, that's when I started. Was it 2011 or 2012? Something like that. I started personal training. Quickly realized that, again, anybody can make anybody lose weight, but you can't keep it off unless you truly get into here. So I started delving into Maxwell Maltz psychocybernetics and Jungian psychology and all these other things, which led me down that psychological path. I was already very much into spirituality from a very, very young age. My mum's very spiritual, my dad's very spiritual, my aunt and her business partner had a spiritual shop. So I learned how to meditate from a very young age, and I had always had crystals around me and Buddha statues. I think I've actually probably got one. Yeah, there's a Buddha there. So it's always been part of my life. So I could help clients with the mindfulness side of things and the deep breath work. And then I got into breath work, and then I got into yoga, and it just all kind of culminated. And it's that whole kind of that ikigai, right? Where the circles kind of cross over, and that thing in the middle is the thing you have to do.
Yeah.
That just kind of happened on its own, and that's been happening along this whole process. And that's how I know I'm in the right place, because things that seem random at that moment, I already know further down the line will connect somewhere, and I'll be like, that's why that happened. Speaking of like the most recent thing that happened to me, which was being diagnosed with an autoimmunity in 2022, randomly out of nowhere, this happened. Ulcerative colitis kicked off in August. By the time I got to November, December time, it was diagnosed. I healed like 70% of it using like what I already know, doing functional blood work, functional health, supplements, all those types of things. But then realized, okay, this needed a little bit of a push. Didn't get on with the medication they gave me. I took it for like 4 weeks. I was like, this is not working. It just made me feel like death. I hated it. So I was like, right, I'm gonna go down the peptides again. So I looked into the peptide side of things, found Dr. William Seeds, started doing his certification, and that led me to finding the combination of peptides that helped it basically just go into a full remission. And then from that point, it just stayed that way. And I was like, okay, it took 10 months to get to this point, 10 months of absolute hell. Like colitis and Crohn's, like IBD, it's one of the most horrible experiences. One, because you think you're going to die. 2, you can't ever leave your toilet. You can't ever go out. If you go more than 10 minutes away from your house, you're having a big panic attack just in case something happens and you need to find a bathroom very, very quickly. So social aspects go out the window, working goes out the window because you lose a load of weight. You can't eat food, not solid food anyway. You can't sleep because it wakes you up at like 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Like you just generally can't get any rest whatsoever. And that's when you're supposed to be healing. So it's a very difficult thing to do. You bleed a lot. You lose a lot of like fluids and minerals and nutrients and stuff like that. It's a really, really horrible thing to go through. So 10 months of that, looking emancipated by the end of it, I was like, right, like now that I've healed this, I understand why. It's so that I can come to the world and be like, look, people that suffer with this, you don't have to suffer and go through this process where Western medicine says, right, once we basically run out of steroid options, which are just suppressing your immune system, causing untold amounts of side effects, or the biologic side of things stop working, which eventually they do. You know, people can take them for years, but eventually they do stop working. Everything stops working. Even something as simple as like a I don't know, like a keto diet, that eventually stops working. Everything stops working eventually. There has to be an alternative, a more natural, more holistic approach. That's where I was like, right, I need to let people know about this. And the second that I opened that up and I made my first post about it, the flood of support and people that were messaging me and be like, oh, I'm the same, or my brother or my mom or my best friends, cats, dogs, best mates also got it. Like everybody just kind of came forward. And I was like, wow, like how many people suffer from autoimmunities? And so I started going into the numbers. And since lockdown, the numbers have just escalated through the roof, where now 1 in 10 people have some form of autoimmunity. That's insane.
Yeah.
That is.
I was like, right, I need to learn way more about autoimmunity and what actually happens in autoimmunity. What's the kind of like the similarities between them all, so that you can look at what's happening inside from an immune and a system perspective, but then also where do they separate and they become different, because there's so many autoimmune diseases. I mean, there's many versions of Crohn's, there's many versions of colitis. So how do you then tailor that? And I was like, right, I need to put a package together for people so that I can treat them this way. So when clients come to me now at that point where I almost describe myself as like the cleaner from Pulp Fiction, Harvey Keitel's character, where when people run into trouble, they're like, call Harvey, call the cleaner. I feel like that now, where people, every time I have a conversation with somebody, when it comes from an autoimmunity health perspective, they're like, Western medicine's basically given up on me. I mean, I even had one client say to me, oh yeah, my GP even called me in and said to me, yeah, so what do you think we should do? I was like, wow, that's confidence building for you. Good old system, all right? So I was like, wow, okay, so I need to learn more, because there's so many people that need this help. And that's just meant now that I have clients that come to me that have got Alzheimer's. I've got mums that come to me, or parents that come to me because they've got an autistic child, or they've got a child with ADHD, or somebody's got hyperthyroidism, or they've got Behçet's or some other autoimmunity. And I'm like, right, we need to work with this. And ultimately, a lot of it is down to the immune system and getting it to be modulated to the point where it's not making fires and fighting everything. But then once you've done that, you've then got to treat the kind of collateral damage that it causes. Then you've got to actually think, okay, what switches are being turned on and signals being sent to create this in the first place? Because if somebody's only had it, like I've only had this for like this much percentage of my life. So what has changed? What switch has been turned on by something where it's now sending the wrong signal out? And how do we stop that signal and send the right one? And that's where the combination of the functional health, functional medicine, plus the peptides, or any other kind of alternative therapy, or even biohacking to some degree, like what can we do to put the body back into more of a homeostatic place? Because ultimately life is very, very stressful. And if you don't do something to create some balance where you're not feeding this perpetual stressed environment, you're never going to get better. And that's one of the hardest things to coach into people, is that you just have to sometimes stop. You can't keep going to the gym. If you're struggling with these things, you can't go. You have to give your body some time out, because that's what it's crying for. You can't keep eating the food that you like to eat. You know, when I was going through my fairs, I was on an elemental diet. That's just liquid. It's not fun. It's not fun when you're smelling your neighbors cooking like eggs and bacon in the morning, and all you want to do is eat eggs and bacon, and you can't. Like, it's hard. But you have to sometimes make these sacrifices. It's the short-term pain for the long-term gain further down the line. And getting people to understand that at the beginning is quite a difficult process, but it's worth it. And that's the part of it that is always that stumbling block for a lot of people. When you talk to them about it, you're like, okay, you are going to have to make sacrifices here. And they're like, I don't want to. Like, you kind of have to, really. Otherwise, you're just going to be in the same place, because you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting to get somewhere else. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Exactly.
Mark, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing and being very vulnerable, because it's not what you had gone through, I'm sure, is not easy, but I can already list the people in my head that I know have autoimmune diseases, and even, have now children, like our friends are beginning to have children that are being pumped with antibiotics from every type of ear infection, chest infection, all of these things. So it is very, very relevant for today, and it's going to resonate with so many people. And I love this hero's journey that you are on, right?
Thank you.
When you're in it, it's effing hell, and you probably don't realize that you're going through it for the reasons that you're going through it. But then, pulling back, your perspective now is changed. And it kind of I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way that it makes it seem is that it all made sense for this very reason, to kind of get you to this highest point of, the truest version of yourself. You wouldn't be able to help people if you didn't go through what you went through.
Exactly. And I think in that regard, I want to just highlight something. it's important to understand that the antibiotic side of things, it's important in some stages.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah, because if something is really, really kind of strong in the body, like a really strong viral infection or something, yeah, you need to go to a hospital and you need to get that calmed down very, very quickly. And then once you've gone on those antibiotics, there are things that like Saccharomyces boulardii or something that you can take either alongside it or afterwards to start repairing the damage to the biome that it's going to cause. Because obviously antibiotics are like napalm. They don't really care about any bacteria. They just wipe the whole thing out. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, because if somebody's got, I don't know, IBD or IBS or SIBO or something like that, and they go on antibiotics, it will wipe everything, which means you're starting from zero, which is great because now you can repopulate. So it's not always a bad thing. But the other thing to state here is with all these things, and I had a guy say this to me today at the gym. He's like, how are you? He's like, whenever I see you on your podcast or on Instagram or in person, he's like, you're always so happy. How are you always like that? I was like, well, because every day I wake up, I don't look at my phone straight away, but I will glance at the screen and I always think, okay, nobody that I love has called me while I've been asleep, which means nobody's died. Yay. I'm grateful for that. Second thing, I'm able to look at my phone, which means I'm alive. Yay. Grateful. So there are two things that I start my day with where I'm like, okay, this is a good day. Everybody's alive. I love this. The other thing, which is just a quote, which is, it is what it is, but it will be what you make it. And so
I love it.
whatever comes to you, it is what it is. It's not personal. It's taken the universe 13.8 billion years to bring you that moment. So it's not personal because it was thought of way before you were there.
Yeah.
But it will be what you make it. So it will either be miserable because that's the way that you look at it, or it will be growth, learning experience. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. It will be. That's life. That's the fun of this game, right? Nothing's going to be easy. Nothing worthwhile anyway. But how you perceive this thing is everything. Perception is the key to all of this type of stuff when it comes to life. As you guys know already, you know, just the name of your podcast says this alone. You know this. How you see everything is everything. So that's how I stay the way that I am. And always, even in moments where you think this is so dark, I can't do this anymore. Not like a suicidal thing, but I just can't cope with this anymore. Well, I would say in 43 years, what's my success rate of getting through everything that I have found challenging? 100%. So I'm winning. I'm not lost yet. So if my success rate is 100%, bring it on. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see how much more resiliency I can grow. Let's see how much more anti-fragile I can be to these things. So perception is always going to be the first change.
I love that. And it's so fitting after listening to your story to tie that quote on to the end of it, because any one of those seems like hundreds of things that you went through could have crushed you.
Yep.
And you never let it. You just kept growing through each experience, and you were after each one you were like ready to take on the next one. I actually heard somebody earlier say our wounds become our wisdom.
They do. Yeah.
And that stuck out. It made me think. I was like, that's perfect. Yeah. That's a perfect quote for the conversation we're about to have. That's true. And it seems like I asked you earlier, like, how did you get into functional health coaching? And you gave a really beautiful answer where you didn't really just get into functional health coaching. You found your purpose. Yep. And that's so powerful, I think. And so it's so like inspiring to hear your story and how you're helping
100%. And I think to kind of jump into that a little bit and just change it ever so slightly, we find the things in life that allow us to create our purpose, because that can be changed at any moment depending on what it is that you feel the most pulled to. But every single thing that you go through is allowing you to find and then culminate together your purpose as to why you're here. That will change, because my purpose when I first got into health and fitness was to coach people into how to move with extra weight on their body, how to squat properly, hinge properly, push properly, pull properly, run properly. Well, now it's, as much as I still do that for people, I don't do it in person anymore, but now it's something completely different. It's now about how do we make you the most optimal version of you? Because again, whenever anybody comes to any coach or whenever they do anything in life, it's because they're trying to be more than they are. Well, that's really hard to do, because I've yet to meet somebody in life that has achieved the capacity to become all that they are. You can't be more, but you can be all. And that's a Carl Jung thing where he says, like, the greatest gift you can give yourself to become who you truly are. So be all that you are rather than more than you are. And that makes the whole process a lot easier because it takes the pressure off a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. That I think that sort of like progression that you were talking about, going from like being a fitness coach and training people to move better and get in better shape to teaching people how to optimize their life and, you know, become all that they can be, is a very like natural progression.
Yeah.
For a lot of people I've talked, or it goes the other way. And I think that for most coaches and trainers, you get to a point where you either completely burn out, either your own body breaks down like you were describing before, or you just get so tired of banging your head against the wall, counting reps and telling people what diet to eat, where they lose weight for a little while and then put it back on, or like it just doesn't work out. And I think that the two paths, it's either you figure out that there's more to it, and there's this sort of holistic path like we were talking about before, where everything is everything, and everything is deeply interconnected to everything else in our lives. Or you keep going the other way on the treadmill, just kind of spinning your tires, stuck in place.
Exactly.
And I think that drive is sort of like the evolution of consciousness. I think that each one of us has that drive to be all that we can be.
Yeah.
And at a young age, like it sounds like with you, you were skinny and you felt like maybe insecure. I don't want to put words in your mouth, or like just didn't want to be sick and weak anymore. Yeah. So there was a drive within you that you wanted to be more than that. Yeah. And the natural place is to go find the meatheads at the gym and ask them how to get strong. Yeah. But that's a huge step on the journey. Yeah. And I think that you've kind of taken that journey and just kept running with it. And now look at like the place that you're at right now, where you're in position to help, you know, thousands of people completely transform their lives. I think it's amazing.
Exactly, brother. Exactly. And I think the biggest lesson I had through all of that, again, going back to the being all that you are, is it's getting you just to be optimal. How can we get somebody to a place where, not everything, because I think that would be a really hard task in today's society to do that, to get everything at optimal levels. But how can we get somebody maybe 90% optimal, where they're not feeling tired all the time, where they're not feeling like they've got to use like toothpicks to keep their eyelids open, and they haven't got to stop and think, what was that word I was thinking of? Or, you know, they stand at the bottom of the stairs and they're wondering, did I just come down or did I just go up? I can't quite remember what's going on here. Like, how we can get people to that point by allowing them to have that breathing space to understand that they don't have to push too hard. They just need to do the right things in the right orders at the right times. It's not complicated. We make it complicated because we try to get there in a rush. Life isn't in a rush. Nature's not in a rush, but yet it achieves everything, right? So we just have to slow ourselves down and realize that where is the sprint? Like, yeah, okay, it would have been great to have started 20 years ago, but, well, we didn't. So we just have to start now and do with what we've got, right? So it's just about that phrase of optimal. Just get somebody to that optimal place, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever the case may be, and understanding that it's a multifaceted approach. You can't just look at the physical. The physical will only get you so far. When you realize that life is multidimensional, there's way more to it than that. And you need growth in all of these areas. And that will allow you to have, like, I think it was Tai Lopez who quoted the 4 pillars of the good life: health, wealth, love, happiness. Like, to be able to excel in all those areas, well, that's 4 dimensions there alone. So we need to be able to be that multifaceted approach in all these things. And that's where this continual beginner's mind, learning, wanting to learn, wanting to grow, kind of needs to stay there, because that's our inner child part of us, which we forget. Because the one thing that this society is very good at is stopping us being children very, very quickly and putting us into like an adult mode where you have to do this and you have to be here and you have to You know, they tell us what to think, how to think, what to say, what not to say, what we can eat, what we can't eat, who we can be friends with, who we can't be friends with, what time to go to bed, what time to wake up, got to go to school, got to get. No, keep in touch with that child part, because the child part is where the ingenuity comes from. It's where the creativity comes from. It's where the spirit comes from. It's where this effortless energy, this continuous effortless energy comes from. That's important, but that only comes through if you keep learning, if you keep trying and failing and growing. Because if from the very beginning, if a baby fell down when it first tried to walk and we laughed when you idiot, like don't even bother, like just stay there on the floor for the rest of your life. Well, nobody would ever walk, right? But we
Yeah.
allow them to keep growing, right? But yet we get to that age in our life where everyone's like, "Ha, idiot, you failed," and now we don't want to do it anymore. Well, we should. It's important to grow. It's important to keep learning, and that is why I have this passion. Is because I don't want to stop learning. I don't want to stop growing, because if I do, I'm now at a plateau, and at a plateau, everything stagnates, and I don't want to be there, because that's where I want to be at the end of my life, right? That very last day, that very last hour, very last minute, that's when I want to stop learning. That's when I want to stop all of that so I can just appreciate what I have around me. But until then, grow through what you go through. So important. Learn the lesson from it, because otherwise it's just going to loop back around and go again.
Yeah, you're going to have to deal with it at some
learn
point.
it, right?
Yeah,
Life's fun like that.
Yeah. So you had mentioned before, I think this ties in, I was thinking about it as you were saying it, but talking about autoimmune issues and how, like, once you kind of do get everything to the point where it's kind of like, okay, you find a little bit of like balance and equilibrium, then it's time to figure out where it came from. Like, what's the mindset aspect of it? What's the thought pattern that's causing this to happen? Because I feel like conventional wisdom, or like the way autoimmune was always described to me, is like some people have bad luck and their body just starts fighting them. And I don't think that's it. I think the body is always healing, and the body is always doing the best it can with what it has. So what have you found, sort of from a mindset standpoint, that helps, or maybe what helped you, or what's helped with your clients, as far as like to stop causing the issue?
Okay. So a lot will be driven by, well, this high level of internal angst that we have. It's unfortunate, because since lockdown, anxiety has gone up here, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can seem to place their finger on why. You know, we were locked in ourselves as well as locked in our homes for over a year, in some places longer in others, disconnected from society, made to fear everybody, made everybody covered their faces so you couldn't see expression, and all of a sudden that became untrusting, because, you know, we need to see everybody's face so that we can understand whether they're friendly or not. So it created this degree of separation, unfortunately. You know, was it Sun Tzu, Art of War, divide and conquer, right? So they separated everybody, which created this solo angst inside everyone, where it just seemed to spiral out of control. And when anxiety runs rampant like that, it's not just a feeling. That's what people think. Oh, I have anxiety. No, it's a chain reaction of chemicals going on through your body, creating a sensation or a feeling. But ultimately, if we can get to the root point of where this is coming from, we can start to calm that down. Because the more stress your body starts to feel through anxiety, the more the anti-stress hormone cortisol will get released. And that's not doing the job. So more cortisol gets released, more cortisol gets released, more cortisol gets released. Unfortunately, cortisol's catabolic. So it breaks things down. So this is why when people are about to step on stage and they're really nervous, they'll have a bad tummy. So it just makes sense. If you've got this high level of anxiety running through your body all the time, well, cortisol's running rampant everywhere, and it's just breaking things down. Well, now your body's on high alert, thinking, hell, what am I going to do here? I need to fix everything, but there's a million things going on. So it starts sending things out to try and fix things as it's breaking down. And then the immune system will get dysregulated, and it won't know, like the innate and the adaptive won't go in order. And this is saying to do this, and this is now doing that. And then this signal gets turned on and that gets turned off at the wrong timing, and things that start breaking down, communication fails. This is what I think is the lead into the uncontrollable autoimmunity. So as much as sometimes it can be a physical trigger, or maybe like a food trigger or something like that, what have you, a lot of it is stemming from here. So mine spiraled out of control because at that particular moment when it started, there was a really big financial thing going on in my life, which was outside of my control. All of a sudden, I have the UK government saying to us, you owe us 15 grand. And I'm like, what? Why? Because you do. You're wrong. No, we're not. No, you really are wrong. One whole year, I fight this till I get to the end where they're like, oh, you were right. I was like, I know I was. I told you this right at the beginning. Yeah, you did. I don't know why we continued it on for a year. Oh, thanks, because it's caused. Brilliant. Awesome. Thanks for that. So it just goes to show you when something is feeling outside of your control, anxiety is going to spiral up. So when you bring yourself back into center and you look at what is within your control, that little circle of control, everything else around that is no longer your concern. It's not really any of your business either, because you can't control it. So you can only really focus in on what you can control, which is ultimately you. So how do you do that? Journaling. Number one, out of the head, onto paper, straight away. Because once it's on paper, it's no longer being held in place. It's now on paper. And if you want to, you can screw it up and throw it away. It doesn't exist. Or you can keep it there as a journal of your journey. But it doesn't have to be neat, doesn't have to be tidy. Just get it out. It's cathartic. I think even, I can't remember the lady's name, but have you heard of what's it called? It's a creative writing tool that people use. Something morning. Tim Ferriss uses it. And it's just literally like a blank.
Like the morning pages or something like.
Yes, that's the one. The morning pages. Something like that is fine. Just literally just don't have to have a prompt. Just literally just get a piece of paper and just write how you're feeling. Doesn't matter about spelling, punctuation, nothing. Just get it out. It's difficult at first, but just get it out. And so this is, I get clients to do this, but I give them like a 5-minute journal or something like that to do. Most of them never journal. So I'm like, just things you're grateful for, 3 positive I am statements in the morning, and how you're going to make this day amazing. That's simple. And then in the evening, what went well? What could you have done better? So like, what was your good deed? What could you have done better? And 3 things that were amazing that day. Nice and simple, right? So now you're starting to control what's up here. Then explaining the process of the fact that we have something like 65,000 thoughts a day. And I think it might have been Deepak Chopra that said like 92% of them are negative in connotation. And then something like 90 odd percent of them are repetitive from weeks, months, years, even ancestrally.
Yes.
Right? So in that case, then only 4-5% of my thoughts are actually mine and from this moment. So everything else is just noise. Okay, cool. Well, that helps. So I'm not my thoughts. Brilliant. That means I can start to control them. Okay, but then how? Okay, cool. Meditation, that will start. Or breath work, that will start, because breath work turns your mind off because you're counting, right? Or yoga nidra. Or there's another one called metacognition, which is kind of like meditation, but you're not trying to not think. You're actually trying to become aware of the thoughts. Or heart math. I love heart math. So that's what I give clients to do, heart math, because it just brings everything in sync. Because, as we know, from the anxiety side of things, if it's coming from here and it's coming through the brainstem, it's coming through the vagal nerve, this has a tone. And if that tone is not right, and this vagal nerve wanders through the whole body, endocrine system, digestive system, the whole lot, well, how that vibrates is going to impact everywhere else in your body. So if you can start to control that and be able to put yourself into a parasympathetic state like that, well, now all of a sudden you can control this anxiety and it starts to not control you. And through the combination of the journaling, the awareness of what's going on here, because we have to understand the why gives us the value. So we need to know that. Then we need to start looking at, okay, so what works for me, whether it's meditation, metacognition, heart math, breath work, whatever, put yourself in sync. I think heart math's great for that because of the resonance that it brings the whole body. Then everything starts to slow and calm. The more you practice that every single day and give yourself those moments of peace where you're not on your phone, you're not answering calls, you're not responding to this, that, fire, or the other, you can just have that moment of absolute stillness. You're telling yourself, you're teaching yourself that you're worthy of that you love yourself enough to gift yourself that. Because when we're always on the go, we are always giving of ourselves, always giving energy or some part of us. And then we keep asking questions like, oh, why does this happen? Why does that happen? Why haven't I had this? Why did he say that? Why? Well, the only time that you can receive is when you're still. I can't receive a gift from somebody if I'm on the run. If somebody tries to give me a present and I'm running past them, how are they supposed to give it to me? They can't. The only way that the universe can gift me something is if I'm still enough to hear it. And I'm silent enough to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you gift yourself that time, even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I understand people are very busy, but gift yourself that time. Turn off Netflix. Those shows ain't going nowhere. Turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
Stay off your phone for the first hour in the morning. If you can't do that the first hour, then wake up an hour earlier and go to bed an hour earlier. Gift yourself that time so that you've got a space, a room, a sofa, a meditation cushion, whatever. Sit, journal, spend time, reflect. As you start working through these emotions, what are held in place through not being recognized, or samskaras, feelings that have got stuck, will start to shift. I love how you're nodding at this, like, because you understand exactly what I'm saying. These samskaras will shift and they'll transcend because they'll become part of you. You let them go. And all of a sudden, weight starts shifting from your body, not just in the sense of the physical weight, but the weight on the shoulders, or wherever it is that you're carrying, you realize you can start to put it down. You don't have to carry it all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start realizing, like, why am I carrying that? Like, my ex gave me that 10 years ago. Why the hell am I still carrying that now? I can let that go. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And all of a sudden, you start realizing that everything that we are running through program-wise is from years ago. You start having all of these little realizations, and all of a sudden the anxiety starts to go down and go down and go down, because you realize that you are in control of you to some degree. Obviously, you can't control like your heartbeat and how your digestion works and all that stuff, but you can influence the things that do, giving you that sense of control. Because the first human need that we have is certainty. We need to have control. We need to know. So by gifting somebody that certainty, which is ultimately what anybody wants, you're allowing them to have control over their own life. And now all of a sudden, the anxiety levels start to drop to the point where they're not there anymore, particularly about that specific thing, like an autoimmune condition, right? So anytime I used to go out, I would do breath work before I'd leave, or I'd do it on the journey. Like Andrew Huberman's physiological sigh is a great one to do, because you can do that while you're driving, you can do that on the train, on the bus, while you're walking. Box breathing's another one that's a good one, but I wouldn't do it in a quick paced way. I'd do it in a slightly slower way. But this is a really good way of just allowing your body to transition into a more calm state. And then you realize that your brain is the one that's creating this anxiety, not you, because it's future predicting. The brain's crap, pardon my language. The brain is rubbish at future predicting, right? If it was great, we'd be able to predict the lottery numbers and stuff like that, but we can't. So the brain's not very good at predicting the future. It's great.
It just predicts what it knows.
Right? It's good at patterns, as Joe Dispenza pointed out. It's great at habits and picking out patterns and repetition. But the only way that changes is if you break that cycle and do different things. So by bringing in the journaling, bringing in the meditation, or whatever it is that you do, plus the space for yourself, these are all different things. And all of a sudden, your brain starts picking up on that and goes, we don't need to be in this ringed tight state anymore. We can decompress a little bit, right? Come back feeling like you've been on a retreat all weekend, when you really haven't. You've just allowed yourself space to chill, right? Just unplug a little bit. I think that's a very long answer to your question, but I think
no, I love it. I'm eating it all up.
A beautiful answer.
Oh, bless you.
As you said, you saw me nodding. It's Dan and I, like you were saying, that you have to interrupt like your habits and stuff. We call them pattern interrupts. That's exactly what it is. But I mean, the listeners will know I am a recovering anxious person. I mean, I just have struggled with anxiety pretty much ever since I was a young child. I mean, this is something that I observed from my own family members, and it is very challenging to get over when you're unaware of it. But exactly like you're saying, journaling, meditation, and breath work were the 3 pillars that helped me. Dan will tell you, I hated to write now I'm obsessed with it. That's how I start my morning. And it's exactly like you're saying, you unfortunately do. It's anxiety is something that for me personally, this is just my opinion, it helped me feel safe because I knew the uncomfortable feelings of it.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't even want to sit in meditation because I didn't want to listen to the horrible thoughts that I had, but I know that most people have as well. We're not very kind to ourselves, exactly like you said. There's 95% of what we think is negative. I mean, it's just, that's how we all operate. But I love that you said we are not our thoughts.
Nope.
But the only way to understand that is to observe those thoughts. And they need to go. It's like clouds passing through the sky. Like they need to go in and out of your mind for them to be recognized, understood, and then you can become more aware of them to begin to change and rewire those patterns. As Joe Dispenza says, you're going to begin to catch yourself saying like, oh, wait a minute. I am a great person instead of, oh, I'm a crazy. That's all it is. It's bringing awareness to how you may have negatively spoken to yourself in the past and being willing to change it.
I think you've said something quite important there, which is the awareness side of it. Mm-hmm. The first step on any journey is the awareness that the change needs to happen. That's the first step, is the awareness. And this is why the first step is the most important. It's the most powerful. Because once you become aware, you can't unsee that. You can't unfeel that, right? So once that happens, a paradigm shift happens inside the brain. The neurons that wire together, fire together, right? So that awareness has fired those neurons, and all of a sudden they start to wire together. The myelin starts to wrap around it and make it a strong connection. So you can't unsee that. You can't unfeel it. You can't unknow it. It's hard to unknow things.
Yeah.
So the awareness side is the most important part. That's the first step. Then it's about thinking, okay, so then how can I do this? How does this happen? Going down the rabbit holes of the likes of Joe Dispenza or Michael Singer or somebody like that. Because I love what you say, because the clouds, right? Because that's Michael Singer from The Untethered Soul. Like such a great book, you know, like he talks about like thoughts, like cars passing when you're driving. You don't pay any attention to passing cars, because if you did, you'd crash. If you paid attention to every car that went past, you would have an accident. That's your thoughts. You don't pay any attention to the cars going past you. So don't pay any attention to the thoughts that go through your head, because they are just passing cars. So only the ones that you pertain to be your own thoughts. What do I want to eat? Thought. Okay, that's mine. I've prompted it. But, you know, if I'm sat in meditation and all of a sudden I've got an image of, I don't know, a rabbit with a shotgun, well, I didn't think of that. The brain did, right? And that's how random the brain is, because it just, the monkey mind chatters. It wants attention because it's used to being in an environment not like ours. It's used to being in an environment which is dangerous, quiet. What's that noise? What is this? What is that, right? So it wants you to be more aware. And it also comes from a place where we probably didn't have much to say, because we didn't really have much language at that point either. So the chatter in the mind is the images that would come up, because that's how we would speak to ourselves in images, right? So that is always on. And it's just about learning to turn the volume down. It probably won't ever go away. It's just turning it down to the point where it's at like zero, or just above zero, where it's just a whisper. And then eventually, as you beautifully put, and as Mujimala says, you become the observer, the witness of your thoughts. And once you become the witness of your thoughts, you've now all of a sudden got distance from your thoughts. And once you've got distance from your thoughts, you can have a 30,000 foot view on them and be like, I don't think that. I don't feel that. Definitely didn't say that. I would never wear those shoes. Like, you can properly distance yourself from it all and be like, this is just nonsense. It's just noise. And then it just passes.
Yeah.
And every single one of them does the same thing. And that's such a beautiful experience. But unless you spend the time working on that muscle, it won't get stronger. This is why going to the gym is important to strengthen the body, the same way doing yoga is important to strengthen the body through end ranges and flexibility. It's important to sit and journal to strengthen the creative process. It's important to sit and meditate or breath work or just to sit in stillness to work on that particular muscle. You can't expect just to sit down and all of a sudden it's going to happen. It doesn't work like that. You have to put in the practice, but unfortunately, people don't give it enough time. Because again, we're all in too much of a rush. So if we can dedicate that time, people will be amazed at the changes that they can make in their life themselves. They don't need a guru. They can do it.
Yeah, everything we need is within us.
Yes, brother, 100%. All we have is all we need, definitely.
Yep. For me, like journaling has been really powerful for me because it's sort of in that same sense. I feel like we all have these stories and we just repeat these stories over and over. And then when you do like build up the strength to sit down and just write the story and then go back and read it, it's exactly what you're saying about the thoughts. It's like, no, wait a minute. It's not always like that. Like that's just sometimes. No, maybe I'm being a little hard on myself. And like, it's almost like ridiculous when we read it back to us. But when it's just going so fast in our mind, we just accept it as being true.
Yep.
I think journaling is a great way to like completely, like you said before, get it out of your head, get it onto paper, and then be able to look at it objectively. And then you can throw it out if you want, or you can laugh at it.
Exactly. And it's cathartic. You know, I think there's a limited space in our mind for this clutter, because that's what it is. It's just clutter.
Yeah.
And I think there's a limited space for that. You know, I think the brain I've got a massive amount of untapped potential because we basically don't know much about it. But that space that holds those constant negative loops, those reoccurring kind of looping patterns, we have to be able to disconnect them at some point or complete those loops. The brain hates incomplete loops. It needs complete loops. And so when you are writing it down, you're almost coaching yourself. And I made a video, like a reel about this ages ago, about how when you've got a problem, and everybody does this, but once you become aware of it, you won't do it as much. Whenever you've got a problem, you will call that mate. Everyone's got that mate or their partner or whoever it might be that you call. And they're like, yeah, you're right to feel that way. He wasn't a nice person, or she wasn't right for you, and you're right to that you let her go, or no, he did cut you up in traffic. You should have responded that way. You were valid in how you felt and how you are. Yes, you should feel angry. It's all emotional validation. And when you finish that call, you're like, yeah. But then when you move on with your day, you're like, I still feel crap about that. Why do I still feel crap about that? Because you've not received a cognitive solution. You've only received emotional validation, which is, yes, you should be angry. Yes, you were right what you say. Yes, 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 yes. You're just around a yes person. They've not helped you in any way, shape, or form. They've actually probably hindered the process. They've not done it purposefully. They just wanted to console you. But what would have been better at the end of that would have been like, okay, so you were right and blah, 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 blah. And then what? And now what are we going to do? Let's find a cognitive solution. Once you find that cognitive solution, closed loop, brain lets go. No more ruminating on it for days and days and days. I can't believe he said that. And I should have said that back to him. And I didn't. I wish I'd said that to him. Well, you didn't. So what's the solution? Probably that you could just call him and say it now if you wanted to, or just let it go. Big deal.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I love that.
So the cognitive solution is the bit that we're always after. And I think journaling is our own self-coaching ourself in a third person perspective, which is always good. Because I can be like, what would Mark do in this situation? Right? Ask yourself that question. What would Mark do? What would Mark say? How would Mark feel? Okay, I now know what I would do, say, and feel. I can write this down. I am now providing myself with my own cognitive solution. End of loop. Move on.
Yeah. Love it.
That reminds me of like David Hawkins talking about fear.
Yep.
Says that like basically the same thing, but you can always just keep like when someone's like I'm afraid of whatever. So like, okay, and then what?
Yep.
Because every fear eventually, if you keep saying and then what, and then what, and then what, you get to the fear of death.
Yep. Exactly.
And that closes the loop. Like that's like, it's like, okay, is this just an irrational fear? I'm afraid to go outside. I'm afraid to talk to this person because eventually I'm going to die.
Yep.
and we're all going to
I
die.
love that. I love that. That's awesome. It's true. It's the only inevitable, right? It's the only
Yeah.
thing that we all have in common in that regard is we're all going to the same place. It's all going to catch up eventually. It's just how do you live in between those moments, right? But I love that. It's so, so true. Because I think it's a little bit like what Jim Rohn used to say. He always used to say the best question to ask somebody is why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Ask why 4 or 5 times, and eventually you get to the real root reason why they feel that way or do the thing that they do. Just keep asking why. And why is that? And why now? Why him? Why her? Why you? Why this? Why that? Bang, 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 bang. All because of no, right? Fear of death.
The epitome of the deep life, asking
Yeah,
why.
yeah,
It's all about
yeah, keep
self-discovery.
Exactly, 100%. And I think the more that you can become vulnerable like that, the more you will learn about yourself, and the more you realize, as we said earlier on, like you don't have to be any more than what you are. Everything you have right now is all that you need.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the creator, God, the divine, the great spirit has gifted you. You don't need more, or you need to unlock it. You know, I think going back to that Carl Jung quote about the greatest gift you can give yourself to become all that you are, he was talking about trauma. So he was like all the, what we would class as, I guess, like samskaras, but all these shadows that we've had to put in the back of our mind because we can't, don't behave like that. Don't say that. Don't sit there. Don't treat her like that. Don't eat this. Get off the side. Don't climb trees. All these things that get shoved to the back of your mind. And you're like, right, okay, so this is who I am. No, because you've now got 50% of your life of things that you can't do in the back of your mind, which you need to bring forward and integrate. One at a time, obviously, all stand in line, bring them through, integrate them. This is becoming all that you are, but that has to happen through the kind of the dark night of the soul experience where you start writing and all of a sudden you uncover that part of you. You're like, oh, I'm not comfortable with this. This doesn't feel right. It feels really weird. And so you'll kind of pull away from it again, and then you'll come back into it and start writing a bit more. And then you might, as you say, come back to it the next day and have a completely different reflective view on it and be like, that's not what it meant yesterday. It meant this. Bam, bam, bam. And you write more. And all of a sudden, these parts of you that have been locked away for probably like most of your life, all of a sudden will start coming forward and starting becoming part of who you are. And your self grows. And you then become all that you are, that gift to yourself. So I think that's a really, really, that's a powerful journal, dude. Powerful. To start that.
Yeah.
So actually, like over the past few days, I didn't even really talk to you about this.
Uh-oh.
I'll open up a little bit.
You're in trouble after this, mate.
So one thing I've talked about a lot on previous episodes of the show is for a long time, I say I really like hated myself. Like my internal dialogue was really harsh. I was very like, you know, resented myself in a lot of ways. It was like, there's a lot of shame and guilt. And over the past, I don't know, maybe the past 5 years, I've really begun to like start to love myself, which it's been like an amazing journey and like really, really powerful for me. But what I've been realizing lately is that there was a lot that I had sort of in that like shadow that I was hiding away for most of my life. And as I've started to integrate those parts of myself and love them and accept them, what I didn't break was the habit of hiding parts of myself, or maybe I stopped hating myself, but I didn't stop the habit of treating myself like I hated myself. So as I integrated different parts of myself, I started hiding other parts that I wasn't even ashamed of. I just needed something. And what I said, what I talked to Elise about is when I used to talk to myself really harshly, I have stopped doing that. But I just started projecting it onto other people and just imagining that somebody else, whether it's somebody in my life or somebody even in like the Instagram comments, like just made up people, I imagine them judging me instead. For things that I wasn't even like ashamed of. It was just a habit where I was beating myself up, but I feel like I was hiding a lot of myself and not really stepping into who I fully am. Because it was not so much that I hated myself, but that I hadn't broken the habit of treating myself like I hated myself, is the way to put it.
I like that.
But that's something where after like the 3rd day of journaling, I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's what's going on here is I'm just stuck in a habit and I haven't just allowed myself to be myself.
Yeah. And
But it's been really, really powerful.
that's a really, really powerful realization. Really powerful.
Mhm.
Because I think we had this conversation when we had our first introductory call. Like, do you do the things in health because you love your body or do you hate your body?
Yes.
Right. And it's the same thing. Like, are you doing the habits that you have in your day because you love yourself or because you hate yourself? Like, are you talking to yourself that way because you hate yourself? Are you not eating the foods that you want to eat and eating healthy and going to the gym 20 times a day and all the rest of it because you love yourself or hate yourself? Well, because you hate yourself,
Mhm.
it's punishment, right?
Yeah.
So we work this hard because we're punishing ourselves. We should be better, do better, be more. But ultimately, it's because we're really just trying to find out who we actually are and just trying to love ourselves for something, anything. And that's again why the friends that we have, the partner that we're with, we don't, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody's partners or anybody's friends, but we don't need people to validate that
Mhm.
so that we can love ourselves. We need to be able to do that without them. So that way, then, whenever we're by ourselves, we're not lonely. Because Anthony
Yeah.
DeMello said there's a massive difference between loneliness and being alone.
Yep.
It's very, very different. And so when you start to work on yourself and you start having those powerful realizations of the self-hate talk that you go through
Mhm.
and the habits of doing that, and you can break that down, all of a sudden you realize that's maybe some of the people that are in your life you've kept around because of how they made you feel rather than what they brought into your life. And all of a sudden that gives you some power to say, okay, well, maybe I don't need to see that person as much, or maybe I don't need to be their friend anymore. Not in a horrible way, just because there's no value there.
Mhm.
There's no exchange going on. And then your whole relationship dynamic starts to change with how you present yourself to the world and to others. And people will notice that in you because they'll be like, you've changed. No, that's not the word you're looking for. The word you're looking for is I've grown. It's a
Yes.
massive, massive difference. There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I've not
Yeah.
changed, I've just grown.
Yeah.
That's the word that
I've
you're
been
looking for.
looking very much into this because I'm struggling that with one of my like very close friends that I'm finding less and less in common with. And I was reading somewhere, it was exactly like you're saying. It's the unhealed version of me needed her in my life, but now I've healed myself enough where I'm not receiving anything from this relationship any longer.
Yep.
And it's
Mhm.
exactly, it's almost like a beautiful destruction of these
Love
older
that.
parts of ourselves that aren't, serving us any longer. But that's really what relationships are here for. They're here to teach us what we need in the moments and to grow. I mean, of course, there are people and some that will last for decades, but others not so much.
No, exactly. I love that beautiful destruction. I like
That's
that.
that's the epitome that I say it almost all the time. It's
I love that.
yeah, I'm in the height of it. I had done it years ago, but I'm in it. But it's just a continuing. It's a continuous,
Always.
beautiful destruction of me. Yay,
Of
yeah.
course. It's never
Actually,
finished.
no, absolutely. I actually very much like this kind of journal prompt into it. Like we'll have to listen to it and see if we want to keep it in. Mark, any last kind of words of wisdom that you've turned your, I like to use pain into purpose.
Yep.
Kind of exactly that we either missed on or that you feel is very important for anybody who is either struggling with autoimmune disease or needing some extra guidance that your beautiful energy and light can shine on to our listeners?
Oh, bless you, my darling. That's such a lovely way of saying it. So I think one of the things that I got from going to Tony Robbins' last in-person event in 2018 before lockdown, I think he's done one since, I think, but in the UK it was his last in-person event, where he said that it's about realizing that you can either find a way or make a way. And I think this is where I come in when it comes to the way that I coach, is I like to be the bringer of hope to people, that we can find a way or make a way. If people have accidents and they're told they're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their life, and then 2, 3 years later, they're walking and running marathons and all these other types of things, there's always a way.
Mhm.
Impossible doesn't mean that it can't be done. It just means we haven't found a way to do it yet. And I think that's the important word to add to a lot of these statements that we make to ourselves is yet. I haven't healed it yet. The way that we talk to ourselves is so powerful. Nikola Tesla said that once you understand frequency and vibration, you understand everything. Words are just sounds. Sounds
Mhm.
are just vibrations and frequency. So what you say has matter. Words cast spell magic, right? So how you word things is so important, particularly what you say up here, because it creates and shapes your world. So adding yet to the end of something is very powerful. Saying I get to do something over I have to do something.
Mhm.
You haven't got to do anything. You're not a child. You get to do these things. And by changing that internally from a psychological perspective, you're switching from a child archetype into an adult archetype. So now all of a sudden you are gaining control because you get to do these things. And when you feel that you get to do something, there's no stress involved. When you have to do something,
Mhm.
you're like, ugh, don't want to do this, right? Don't have to do anything. You get to do these things. And there was a quote that I was going to give you guys. It's a Viktor Frankl quote. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I can't remember it. I've got a quote wall up here. I need to be able to remember what that quote is. Have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes, I loved it.
I can't remember what that quote is.
You can let us know if it comes to you.
Yeah, I'll remember. Do
You
you know,
know where to find us.
it's so bad because I say it all the time. It's, yes, between action and response, there is a space. In that space is your power to choose your response. And in your response lies your growth and your freedom. That is everything.
I love it. That I feel like that's such an amazing way to wrap up the
Mhm.
show. It's inspirational, it's meaningful. Yes, that's the power that we get to choose in any moment.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
my
all
gosh.
choice. All choice.
Mark, this has been such a
Yes.
pleasure. I am
Oh,
just so
sorry, thank you.
grateful, yeah, that the universe brought us together
I
and that
am.
we can continue this
Mhm.
relationship. But for anybody who's really interested in learning more about you and your services, where can people find you?
The best place to find me will be on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. And that's at the Everyday Athlete. Just
Awesome.
come and follow, drop me a DM if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Amazing, Mark. This has been just
Yeah.
deep on so many levels.
Mhm.
We can't
Has
thank you
been.
enough for joining us.
Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. And listen, thank you so much for having me. I'm very humbled that you invited me onto your podcast. And I hope one day I can return the favor and also invite you onto mine.
Yeah, of course.